Delta Airlines Flight 1857 sits immobile on the tarmac at Atlanta International. Police officers board the plane. Passengers record on phones. Isaiah and Zion Washington Black twin brothers stand in handcuffs. The flight attendant who called security looks satisfied. Karen Blackwell, a white woman, smirks from seat 2B. Months later, their lawyer discovers flight camera footage that changes everything. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever witnessed discrimination on public transportation. The details of what happened next will leave you stunned. 6 hours before police stormed Delta Airlines, Flight 1857, Isaiah and Zion Washington moved through Atlanta International Airport with purposeful strides. The twin brothers, both 28, carried matching leather briefcases containing identical MacBook Pros, presentation materials, and the culmination of 4 years of grinding work. "You checked the presentation again?" Isaiah asked, adjusting his navy blue suit jacket. Though identical in appearance with the same close-cropped hair, warm brown skin, and athletic 6-foot builds, the twins had distinct personalities. Isaiah was the worrier, the detail-oriented planner who triple-checked everything. Zion flashed the easy smile that had charmed investors since their Georgia Tech days. "Fifth time this morning. The pitch is solid. Jameson Capital is going to love what we've built." Their journey to this moment had been anything but smooth. Raised in South Atlanta by a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, the twins had defied statistics. Their perfect SAT scores had earned them full scholarships to Georgia Tech, where they'd majored in computer science and business respectively. While classmates landed cushy jobs at Google and Microsoft, the Washington brothers had taken the riskier path. They'd created ConnectUp, an app designed to link minority-owned businesses with investors specifically interested in diversity. After 4 years of ramen dinners and shared studio apartments, their platform had gained enough traction to attract attention from Jameson Capital, one of Silicon Valley's most prestigious venture capital firms. "This meeting could change everything," Isaiah said, checking his watch. "Our lives, Mom's life, no more 60-hour weeks for her." Zion nodded. "Which is exactly why we splurged on first-class tickets. Today we're arriving as equals, not supplicants." The brothers had debated the expense. $3,000 for round-trip first-class tickets meant dipping into their emergency fund. But Zion had insisted the psychological advantage was worth it. "We're not showing up cramped and creased from economy. We're arriving refreshed-looking and feeling like the executives we are." At the check-in counter, the Delta agent smiled warmly. "Good morning, Mr. Washington and Mr. Washington. You're all set for Flight 1857 to San Francisco, seats 2A and 2B in first class. Boarding begins in 45 minutes at Gate C21. The twins sailed through security with pre-check status, another small investment in their professional image, and arrived at the gate with time to spare. Isaiah checked his phone. Jameson's assistant confirmed our car service from SFO. We'll have time to check into the hotel, freshen up review notes once more. Zion stretched his long legs out in the waiting area. "Relax, bro. We've practiced this pitch in our sleep. ConnectUp has already linked 200 minority businesses with $15 million in funding. Our numbers speak for themselves." Yet as boarding began, Isaiah couldn't shake his uneasiness. He'd experienced too many random security checks, too many suspicious looks when flying, too many assumptions about whether he belonged in business class. His stomach tightened as the gate agent called for first-class boarding. Zion sensed his brother's tension. "This time will be different," he said quietly. "We earned these seats. We belong here." The brothers boarded first, settling into the spacious first-class seats 2A and 2B. Isaiah by the window, Zion in the aisle. They stowed their briefcases in the overhead compartment and accepted pre-flight sparkling water from a flight attendant. "Gentlemen, my name is Jessica. I'll be taking care of first class today. We'll begin our full beverage service once we reach cruising altitude." Isaiah nodded politely, placing his boarding pass in the seat pocket. As coach passengers began filing past, he took deep breaths, trying to focus on the meeting ahead rather than the curious glances from other passengers. I need to use the restroom before takeoff, Zion said, unbuckling his seatbelt. Watch my stuff. Isaiah nodded, taking his brother's phone and placing it in the seat pocket. I'll do the same after you get back. Don't want to be uncomfortable for the 4-hour flight. Both brothers left their suit jackets draped over their seats, Isaiah's navy blue over seat 2A, Zion's charcoal gray over 2B, the universal signal that the seats were occupied. Neither could have predicted that this simple bathroom break would set off a chain of events that would not only endanger their career-defining meeting, but expose an ugly reality many preferred to ignore. When Isaiah returned from the restroom, he immediately sensed something was wrong. His brother stood in the aisle with an expression that mixed confusion and controlled frustration. In seat 2B, Zion's assigned seat, sat a white woman in her early 50s, blonde hair, cut in an expensive bob fingers, adorned with several diamond rings, scrolling through her iPhone with manicured nails. "Excuse me, ma'am," Zion was saying as Isaiah approached. "I believe you're in my seat. I'm 2B. The woman barely glanced up. "No, this is my seat." Isaiah joined his brother, noting that Zion's suit jacket had been moved to the floor. "There seems to be a misunderstanding," Isaiah said, keeping his voice deliberately calm. "My brother was sitting in 2B. We just stepped away to use the restroom before takeoff." The woman they would later learn her name was Karen Blackwell finally looked up, her expression a mixture of annoyance and dismissal. "I always sit in first class. I know my seat." "We all have assigned seats," Zion explained patiently. "Could we check your boarding pass? Mine clearly says 2B. Karen's face hardened. "Are you suggesting I don't know how to read a boarding pass? I've been flying first class since before you were born." Isaiah noticed other first-class passengers watching the interaction. An older white man in 1A had lowered his Financial Times. A young white couple in 3A and 3B exchanged glances. "I'm not suggesting anything, ma'am," Zion said, his voice still even. "I'm just trying to sort out a misunderstanding. My jacket was on this seat." "I moved it," Karen said flatly. "It was in my way." A flight attendant approached Jessica Reynolds, the one who had welcomed them earlier. She was in her mid-30s with auburn hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Is there a problem here?" Before either brother could respond, Karen spoke up. "These men are harassing me about my seat." Isaiah felt his chest tighten, but kept his expression neutral. "There's a misunderstanding about assigned seating. My brother and I are in 2A and 2B. We stepped away briefly to use the restroom before takeoff, leaving our jackets on our seats. When we returned, this lady had taken my brother's seat." Jessica turned to the brothers. "Sir, I'm going to need you to lower your voice." Isaiah blinked in confusion. Neither he nor Zion had raised their voices. In fact, they'd been careful to speak quietly, precisely, to avoid being stereotyped as angry black men. "We're speaking calmly," Zion pointed out, showing his boarding pass. "See, I'm assigned to 2B. We'd just like to resolve this so everyone can get comfortable before takeoff." Karen cut in her voice, noticeably louder than the brothers. "I don't feel safe with these two men hovering over me. They're being very aggressive." Jessica's eyes darted between the brothers and Karen. Other passengers were now openly watching. "Ma'am, could I see your boarding pass as well?" Zion asked Karen directly. "I don't have to show you anything," Karen snapped. Jessica seemed hesitant to ask Karen for her boarding pass. "Perhaps we can find alternative seating for you gentlemen," she suggested. Isaiah felt a familiar sinking feeling. "We paid for these specific seats," he said. "We're traveling together for a business meeting. Could you please verify everyone's boarding passes? That should resolve the issue immediately." Jessica pressed her lips together. "Sir, I'm trying to resolve this situation without further disruption." The subtext was clear. The disruption in her mind was coming from the brothers, not from the woman who had taken their seat. "We're happy to show our boarding passes," Isaiah said, handing his to Jessica while Zion did the same. "We just want to sit in our assigned seats." Jessica examined their boarding passes with a slight frown. Meanwhile, other passengers continued boarding, creating a backup in the aisle as people tried to maneuver around the situation. "These do show 2A and 2B," Jessica acknowledged, then turned to Karen. Ma'am, could I please see your boarding pass as well? Karen sighed dramatically, as if greatly inconvenienced. This is ridiculous. I fly this route twice a month. Another flight attendant approached a black man in his 40s with a name tag reading Marcus Bailey. Everything all right, Jess? He asked, immediately assessing the situation. We're having a seating issue, Jessica replied. Marcus nodded professionally. Let's sort this out quickly so we can maintain our departure time. Could I see everyone's boarding passes, please? His calm, authoritative tone seemed to diffuse some of the tension. Isaiah and Zion had already provided theirs. After a moment of visible reluctance, Karen finally opened her purse and produced her boarding pass. Marcus examined it. Miss Blackwell, your assigned seat is 16C. That's in the main cabin, not first class. Karen's expression shifted from smug certainty to indignation. There must be a mistake. I always fly first class. Your boarding pass clearly shows 16C, Marcus said firmly but respectfully. I'll be happy to escort you to your correct seat. This is outrageous, Karen said, her voice rising. I want to speak to the captain. I'm being discriminated against. Isaiah and Zion exchanged glances. The irony wasn't lost on them. The captain is preparing for departure, Marcus explained. I assure you we're simply enforcing the seating assignments all passengers agreed to when purchasing their tickets. By now, nearly every eye in first class was on them. Several passengers had taken out phones. The confrontation was being recorded from multiple angles. I refuse to move, Karen declared, crossing her arms. These men are trying to steal my seat. The businessman in one suddenly spoke up. I saw these young men being quite aggressive, he said. Isaiah recognized him as another frequent first-class passenger he'd seen on previous flights. The man's name tag on his briefcase read, Gerald Palmer, Executive VP. Sir, with all due respect, we've been nothing but calm and reasonable, Zion said. See how they talk back, Karen said. I don't feel safe. Jessica looked increasingly uncomfortable. Over the PA system came an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a slight delay due to a passenger seating issue. We apologize for the inconvenience and expect to resolve this shortly. Frustrated sighs erupted throughout the cabin. Isaiah felt the weight of accusing eyes, the familiar burden of being perceived as the problem rather than the victim of one. The lead flight attendant, a white woman in her 50s with a name tag reading Diane Foster, approached with a tight smile. What seems to be the issue here, she asked, looking directly at the brothers rather than taking in the whole situation. And with that, what should have been a simple seating verification began spiraling into something far more serious. The cabin air grew thick with tension as Diane Foster, the lead flight attendant, assessed the situation with narrowed eyes. Her gaze lingered on Isaiah and Zion before finally acknowledging Karen Blackwell, who had now worked herself into a state of visible distress. These men are trying to take my seat, Karen said, her voice trembling with what sounded like practiced vulnerability. I just want to get to San Francisco safely. Marcus Bailey, the black flight attendant who had correctly identified the seating discrepancy, attempted to clarify. Diane, I've checked all boarding passes. These gentlemen, he gestured to Isaiah and Zion, are assigned seats 2A and 2B. Miss Blackwell's boarding pass shows she's assigned to 16C in economy. Diane hardly glanced at Marcus. I'll handle this, she said curtly. The boarding passes confirm we're in the right, Isaiah said calmly. We just want to take our assigned seats. Don't speak to me in that tone, Diane snapped. Isaiah blinked, genuinely confused. I'm sorry, what tone? I'm simply stating facts. Karen dabbed at her eyes with a tissue she'd produced from her designer handbag. I don't understand why I'm being treated this way. I'm a Platinum Medallion member. Perhaps there's been a system error, Diane suggested, immediately taking Karen's side, despite the clear evidence. Let me see what I can do. There's no system error, Zion said firmly. Our boarding passes and the computer system both show that 2A and 2B are our assigned seats. We paid for first class specifically for this flight. Gerald Palmer, the businessman in 1A, closed his newspaper with a sharp snap. "I've been watching this whole interaction. These young men have been confrontational from the start." Isaiah fought to maintain his composure. "Sir, with all due respect, we've been nothing but polite while trying to resolve this misunderstanding." "See how they talk back," Karen said loudly, ensuring other passengers could hear. So aggressive. By now, the boarding process had stalled completely. Passengers stuck in the aisle were growing visibly frustrated, checking watches and sighing loudly. The scheduled departure time had already passed. "We're going to miss our connection," someone called from the back of the plane. Diane turned to Isaiah and Zion. "Gentlemen, perhaps you could take seats in economy just for this flight. We can offer you a partial refund." Isaiah felt his blood pressure rising but kept his voice steady. "We paid for these specific seats. We're traveling together for an important business meeting. We need to arrive rested and prepared." "You're holding up an entire flight over a seat," Diane said, her implication clear they were being difficult. Marcus stepped forward again. "Diane, policy is clear. Passengers must sit in their assigned seats unless there's an approved change. The computer shows these gentlemen are assigned to 2A and 2B. Diane gave Marcus a look that could freeze water. "Thank you, Marcus. I'm aware of the policy." Isaiah, sensing they needed documentation of what was happening discreetly, took out his phone and began recording the interaction. Diane immediately noticed. "Sir, recording crew members is against airline policy. Put that phone away immediately." Actually, Zion interjected, "FAA regulations allow passengers to record as long as devices are in airplane mode during critical phases of flight. We're still at the gate." Karen suddenly stood up, pointing a manicured finger at Zion. "He just threatened me. Did everyone hear that? He threatened me." Isaiah was stunned. "Ma'am, my brother didn't say anything remotely threatening." "I heard it too," Gerald Palmer chimed in. He raised his hand in a threatening manner. Isaiah and Zion exchanged incredulous looks. Nothing of the sort had happened, yet somehow a false narrative was being constructed in real time around them. Several other passengers in first class, most of them white, nodded in agreement with Gerald's fabricated account. "I didn't raise my hand or make any threats," Zion said, his voice betraying frustration for the first time. "This is absurd." The captain's voice came over the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to the ongoing disturbance, if we cannot resolve this situation in the next 5 minutes, we'll have to return to the gate and delay the flight." A chorus of groans and angry mutters swept through the cabin. Several passengers openly glared at Isaiah and Zion, evidently blaming them for the delay rather than Karen, who was actually sitting in the wrong seat. Marcus looked deeply uncomfortable, caught between professional obligation and the clear injustice unfolding before him. He leaned toward Diane and whispered something, but she shook her head dismissively. "That's enough," Diane declared. "I'm calling security." For what Isaiah asked, genuinely bewildered. "For trying to sit in the seats we paid for." But Diane had already picked up the cabin phone, her decision made. "We have disruptive passengers in first class," she said into the receiver. "We need assistance." The situation had escalated from a simple seating verification to a security issue in a matter of minutes. As Isaiah watched Diane speak into the phone, he realized with a sinking feeling that what they were experiencing wasn't just about airline seats. It was about who was believed, who was perceived as reasonable versus threatening, who belonged in first class and who didn't. And in that moment, as his career-making meeting in San Francisco seemed increasingly in jeopardy, Isaiah understood that no achievement, no degree, no success could fully shield him from these encounters. The weight of this realization pressed on his chest like a physical force as he watched Diane finish her call, a look of satisfaction crossing her face as she hung up the phone. Do you agree with how this situation was handled? Comment number 1 if you think the flight attendants should have simply checked everyone's boarding passes from the start. Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed unfair treatment on public transportation. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about everyday injustice and how people fight back. What do you think will happen when security arrives? Will they check everyone's boarding passes fairly, or will they make assumptions about who belongs where? Let's find out in Part 5. The mood in the cabin shifted palpably as passengers realized security had been called. What had begun as annoying a seating disagreement delaying takeoff now carried an undercurrent of real tension. Isaiah and Zion remained standing in the aisle, neither willing to surrender the seats they had rightfully purchased, yet increasingly aware of how the situation was spiraling beyond their control. "You really should just move to economy," a middle-aged white woman in 3A suggested loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's not worth delaying the whole flight." Isaiah fought to maintain his composure. "Would you give up your first-class seat if someone took it and refused to move?" he asked. The woman flushed and turned away. Karen Blackwell remained firmly planted in seat 2B, dabbing occasionally at dry eyes with her tissue. "I don't understand why I'm being traumatized like this," she said to Diane. "I'm a loyal customer." Zion took a deep breath. "Ma'am, no one is trying to traumatize you. This is a simple matter of assigned seating. Your boarding pass says 16C. Ours say 2A and 2B. "So aggressive," Karen murmured, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "I don't feel safe." Marcus Bailey, the black flight attendant who had correctly identified the seating issue earlier, approached Diane and spoke in a low voice. "Diane, we have a 4-hour flight ahead. We need to resolve this by the book. Their boarding passes clearly show." "I said I'll handle this." Marcus Diane cut him off sharply. "Why don't you prepare the galley for beverage service?" Marcus hesitated, visibly torn between professional subordination and moral clarity. "These gentlemen are in their correct seats. That's not in dispute." "What's in dispute is their behavior," Diane replied. "Now please do your job and let me do mine." A college-aged woman sitting in 4C raised her hand. "Excuse me, I've been watching this whole thing. The brothers haven't done anything wrong. The lady took their seat and won't move." Karen swiveled in her seat. "Mind your own business, young lady." "The flight is everyone's business at this point," the young woman replied. "We're all being delayed because you won't sit in your assigned seat." Gerald Palmer from seat 1A turned around. "This isn't your concern. These men have been confrontational from the start." Isaiah couldn't stay silent. "Sir, that's simply not true. We've been nothing but polite while trying to resolve this situation." "See how they talk back," Gerald said, as if Isaiah had just proven his point. Other passengers began taking sides, some arguing that the twins should just give up and move to economy, others insisting that assigned seats should be honored. The cabin, designed for luxury and comfort, had transformed into a microcosm of societal divisions. A flight attendant from economy came forward to whisper something to Diane. She nodded and addressed the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to this ongoing disturbance, the captain has decided to return to the gate. We apologize for the inconvenience and will provide updates as available." Collective groans of frustration filled the cabin. A businessman checking his watch exclaimed, "I'm going to miss my connection to Tokyo." "I hope you're happy," a woman told Isaiah directly. "You've ruined everyone's travel plans." The injustice of this accusation being blamed for a situation they hadn't created stung sharply. "Ma'am, we're simply trying to sit in the seats we paid for," Zion explained calmly. "The person in the wrong seat is causing the delay, not us." Isaiah noticed Marcus standing near the galley, watching the scene unfold with an expression of helpless frustration. Their eyes met briefly, and Marcus gave an almost imperceptible nod of solidarity before turning away. The plane began moving, taxiing back toward the terminal instead of the runway. The sensation felt like defeat, even though Isaiah and Zion had done nothing wrong. "Airport security will meet us at the gate," Diane announced, with barely concealed satisfaction. "They'll escort the disruptive passengers off the aircraft so the rest of you can continue your journey." Isaiah's stomach dropped. The implication was clear. He and Zion were about to be removed from the flight. "This is insane," Zion said under his breath. "We have the right seats. We've been nothing but polite. And we're about to be kicked off the flight." Karen sat primly in seat 2B, a small, triumphant smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She leaned over to Gerald Palmer and whispered something that made him nod in agreement. Isaiah noticed the college student in 4C was recording the scene discreetly from her phone. Other passengers, too, had phones tilted toward the confrontation. Whatever happened next would be documented from multiple angles. "Maybe we should just go," Isaiah muttered to his brother. "We can book another flight, still make it to San Francisco by tonight." Zion shook his head firmly. "No, we've done nothing wrong. If we leave, we're admitting guilt. We have a right to be here, to sit in the seats we paid for." He paused, then added, "And the next, black passengers who encounter Karen or Diane will face the same treatment." The plane came to a stop at the gate. Through the windows, Isaiah could see two uniformed airport security officers waiting in the jetway. His heart pounded against his ribs. "Gentlemen," Diane said with artificial sweetness, "security will escort you off the aircraft now." "We've broken no rules or regulations," Isaiah stated firmly, looking Diane directly in the eye. "We are simply attempting to sit in our assigned seats." "The captain has final authority over this aircraft," Diane replied, "and has determined you're creating a disturbance." Marcus stepped forward. "Diane, this isn't right. You know it isn't." She turned to him, eyes flashing. "One more word and you'll be written up for insubordination." The jetway door reopened. The security officers stepped onto the plane, faces impassive as they surveyed the scene. "We need to see everyone's boarding passes," Zion said, making one last appeal to reason. "That will resolve this immediately." But reason had left the aircraft long ago, replaced by something much uglier and more primitive. As the security officers approached, Isaiah realized they were about to become another statistic, another viral video, another example of what happens when you're black and insist on what is rightfully yours. The tension in the cabin was unbearable now. Passengers watching, recording, judging, Karen's smug satisfaction, Diane's vindictive authority. And throughout it all, the persistent, maddening reality they had done nothing wrong. Have you ever been blamed for a situation you didn't create? Comment number 1 if you believe Karen should have been the one escorted off the plane. Do you think the airline staff handled this professionally? Hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves equal treatment regardless of race. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about everyday injustice and how people respond. What happens when security gets involved? Will they check everyone's boarding passes and resolve the situation fairly, or will the brothers face even more discrimination? The confrontation is about to reach a breaking point, in part. 6. The two airport security officers who boarded Delta Flight 1857 couldn't have presented a more striking contrast. Officer James Daniels was white, mid-50s, with a weathered face and the confident bearing of someone used to being obeyed without question. Officer Miguel Rodriguez was Latino, younger, perhaps in his early 30s, with a carefully neutral expression that suggested he was reserving judgment until he understood the situation. Diane Foster immediately approached them with Karen Blackwell close behind. "These gentlemen have been creating a disturbance," Diane said, gesturing toward Isaiah and Zion, who remained standing in the aisle. "They've been aggressive and confrontational, refusing to follow crew member instructions." "They threatened me," Karen added, her voice quavering with manufactured distress. "I don't feel safe with them on this flight." Officer Daniels nodded, his mind seemingly made up before hearing all sides. Officer Rodriguez, however, surveyed the scene with more careful consideration. "Sir, can you explain what's happening here?" Rodriguez asked, addressing the twins directly. Isaiah stepped forward, maintaining deliberate calm in his voice. "My brother and I are in seats 2A and 2B. We boarded early and took our assigned seats. We both used the restroom before takeoff, leaving our jackets on our seats. When we returned, this lady," he nodded toward Karen, "had taken my brother's seat and refused to move. When we showed our boarding passes proving these are our assigned seats, she still refused. That's the entire situation." "He's lying," Karen interjected. "These seats are mine. They've been threatening me, making me feel unsafe." "We have our boarding passes right here," Zion said, holding his up along with Isaiah's. They clearly show we're assigned to seats 2A and 2B. Officer Rodriguez examined the boarding passes carefully. These do indicate seats 2A and 2B, he confirmed, then turned to Karen. Ma'am, may I see your boarding pass as well? Karen crossed her arms. I've already shown it to the flight attendant. My seat assignment has been verified. Actually, it hasn't, Marcus Bailey spoke up from nearby. Her boarding pass shows seat 16C in economy. I verified this myself. Diane shot Marcus a warning look, which he pretended not to notice. Ma'am, I need to see your boarding pass, Rodriguez repeated more firmly. This is harassment, Karen declared. I've been flying this airline for 20 years. I know my seat assignment. Officer Daniels stepped in. Ma'am, you don't need to show it again if crew members have already verified your seat. Rodriguez looked at his partner with surprise. James, standard procedure is to verify all documentation in a seating dispute. These gentlemen are being disruptive, Daniels replied dismissively. The captain wants them removed. Throughout the cabin, passengers watched the scene unfold with a mixture of frustration and fascination. The scheduled departure time had long since passed, and the delay was affecting everyone's travel plans. I have a connecting flight to Tokyo, a businessman called out angrily. We're going to miss our daughter's graduation, an elderly couple in economy added. The pressure in the cabin was building. Isaiah could feel dozens of eyes on them, most assuming they were the problem simply because security had been called. Captain Neil Harrison's voice came over the PA system. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. If we cannot resolve this situation in the next 5 minutes, we'll have to cancel this flight. Our crew has exceeded their duty hours limit, and we won't have sufficient time to reach San Francisco before they time out. A collective groan rose from the passengers, followed by angry murmurs. Just get off the plane, someone shouted at the twins. We have done nothing wrong, Isaiah said, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. We are simply trying to sit in the seats we paid for. Officer Rodriguez turned to Karen once more. Ma'am, for the final time, I need to see your boarding pass. Karen's eyes darted between the officers, seeming to calculate her options. Finally, with visible reluctance, she opened her purse and produced her boarding pass. Rodriguez examined it. This confirms you're assigned to seat 16C, not 2B. Ma'am, you need to move to your assigned seat. This is outrageous, Karen sputtered. I always sit in first class. Not today, according to your ticket, Rodriguez replied firmly. Officer Daniels frowned at his partner, then addressed Diane. What would you like us to do here? It's your call as the senior flight attendant. The question was, inappropriate security officers were supposed to enforce rules objectively, not defer to flight crew preferences when the facts were clear. But Diane seized the opportunity. These men have been disruptive and uncooperative throughout the boarding process, she said. The captain has requested they be removed from the flight. That's not accurate, Marcus interjected. They've been perfectly reasonable. The only disruption has been caused by a passenger sitting in the wrong seat and refusing to move. Diane turned to Marcus, fury in her eyes. That's enough, Bailey. Return to the galley immediately. Removing passengers who are in their correct seats would violate airline policy and possibly federal regulations. Marcus continued standing his ground. Officer Rodriguez nodded in agreement. He's right. The documentation clearly shows these gentlemen are in their assigned seats. The woman needs to move to seat 16C. Daniels looked uncomfortable, but couldn't argue with the evidence. Ma'am, he said to Karen, please gather your belongings and move to your assigned seat. I will not, Karen declared, her voice rising. I'm not sitting in economy. This is discrimination. The irony of her claim hung in the air. Ma'am, if you refuse to sit in your assigned seat, we'll have to escort you off the aircraft, Rodriguez said. This flight has already been significantly delayed. Do you know who I am? Karen demanded. My husband is a vice president at Delta Corporate. This claim immediately raised eyebrows throughout the cabin. If true, it suggested she had attempted to use nepotism to secure a seat upgrade without proper authorization. Ma'am, please move to your assigned seat or deplane Rodriguez, repeated his patients, visibly wearing thin. Karen's face flushed red with anger.
I will not be treated this way. I want all of your names and badge numbers. You'll be hearing from our legal department.
The captain's voice came over the PA system again. Final call. If this situation is not resolved immediately, this flight will be canceled. The tension in the cabin reached a breaking point. Passengers began shouting, some at Karen, some at the twins, some at the flight crew. Just move to your seat. We're all going to be stranded. I paid thousands for this ticket. Isaiah and Zion exchanged glances. Despite having done nothing wrong, they were at the center of a storm that threatened to derail not just their important business meeting, but the travel plans of everyone on board. We need a resolution now, Officer Daniels said, finally seeming to recognize the gravity of the situation. Karen stood up suddenly, grabbing her designer handbag. For a moment, it appeared she might finally comply. Instead, she pointed dramatically at the Washington brothers. These men threatened me. I heard one of them say he would deal with me after the flight. The accusation hung in the air, blatantly false, yet impossible to disprove. Several passengers gasped. Diane's eyes widened in theatrical alarm. That's absolutely untrue, Isaiah said firmly. We never said anything like that. I heard it too, Gerald Palmer chimed in from seat 1, supporting Karen's fabrication. Very threatening tone. Officer Daniels immediately stiffened. Threatening a passenger is a federal offense. They never made any threats, the college student from 4C called out. I've been recording this whole thing. They've been completely calm and reasonable. Recording on aircraft is against regulations, Diane snapped. Actually, it's not, Rodriguez corrected her. FAA regulations permit recordings as long as devices are in airplane mode during critical phases of flight. The situation had reached an impasse. Karen refused to move to her assigned seat. The twins refused to give up their rightful seats. The captain was threatening to cancel the flight. Passengers were growing increasingly hostile. And now, false accusations of threats had elevated the stakes dramatically. Officer Daniels spoke into his radio, requesting backup. This situation requires additional assistance, he said, giving Isaiah and Zion a hard look. We may need to remove multiple passengers. As Isaiah heard this, he realized with a sinking feeling that despite having done absolutely nothing wrong, despite having followed every rule, despite having paid for their seats, despite having remained calm and reasonable throughout, they might still be removed from this flight. Their critical business meeting, potentially life-changing for them and their company, might be missed. All because a privileged woman decided their assigned seats belonged to her, and a system designed to protect everyone equally had instead protected only her. The jetway door opened again. 2 Atlanta Police Department officers stepped onto the aircraft, their hands resting casually but visibly on their holstered weapons. Isaiah felt his mouth go dry. What had begun as a simple seating dispute was now verging on something far more dangerous. He looked at his brother, saw the same recognition in Zion's eyes, and wondered how much worse this situation could possibly get. The arrival of Atlanta Police Department officers changed the atmosphere in the cabin instantly. Passengers fell silent, the previous angry murmurs giving way to a tense, watchful quiet. The 2 officers, Officer Ryan Blackburn and Officer Tanya Morris, surveyed the scene with professional detachment. "What's the situation here?" Officer Blackburn asked, directing his question to the security officers rather than assessing the circumstances independently. Diane Foster immediately stepped forward. "These 2 men," she gestured toward Isaiah and Zion, "have been disruptive and threatening to other passengers. They've refused crew member instructions and created a significant disturbance." Karen Blackwell nodded vigorously. "I don't feel safe with them on this flight. They threatened me." Isaiah tried to interject. "Officer, there's been a misunderstanding." "I'm not talking to you right now, sir." Officer Blackburn cut him off sharply. "Please remain silent while we gather information." Officer Morris was examining the scene more carefully, noting the brothers' professional attire and calm demeanor. "What specific threats were made?" she asked Karen. Karen hesitated momentarily. He said, He said he would deal with me after we landed in San Francisco, in a very menacing tone. That's absolutely false, Zion stated firmly. We never said anything remotely threatening. Gerald Palmer spoke up from seat 1A. I heard it too. Very threatening. These gentlemen have been aggressive throughout the boarding process. Officer Rodriguez, the security officer who had verified the boarding passes, stepped forward. Officers, I should point out that this entire situation began because Miss Blackwell is sitting in the wrong seat. Her boarding pass shows seat 16C in economy, while these gentlemen are correctly assigned to seats 2A and 2B in first class. Officer Morris nodded. So, this is a seating dispute. It was Marcus Bailey added from nearby until false accusations started flying. These men have been nothing but polite and reasonable while trying to claim their rightful seats. Diane shot Marcus. Another warning look. Bailey, this is your final warning. Return to your station immediately. Officer Blackburn seemed to have made up his mind. Gentlemen, he addressed Isaiah and Zion, we're going to need you to deplane so this flight can proceed. What Isaiah couldn't hide his shock. We've done nothing wrong. We're in our correct seats. This isn't about seating anymore, Blackburn replied. When a passenger makes a claim about feeling unsafe due to threats, we have to take that seriously. But no threats were made, Zion protested. She's lying, and we have multiple witnesses who can confirm that. The college student in 4C raised her hand. I've been recording this whole interaction. They never threatened anyone. The woman took their seat and refused to move. Officer Morris looked interested. May I see that recording, miss? Absolutely not, Diane interjected. Recording crew members is against airline policy. That's not accurate, Isaiah stated. FAA regulations permit recordings as long as devices are in airplane mode during critical phases of flight. Sir, I need you to comply with deplaning immediately, Officer Blackburn said, his tone hardening. This is not a negotiation. We have a constitutional right to due process, Zion replied, his legal knowledge surfacing. You cannot remove us from this flight based on false accusations without investigation. Blackburn's expression darkened. Are you refusing a direct order from a law enforcement officer? The question was a trap. If they said yes, they'd be arrested for obstruction. If they complied, they'd be effectively admitting guilt, despite having done nothing wrong. We're not refusing, Isaiah clarified carefully. We're requesting proper investigation before action is taken. Our boarding passes prove we're in the correct seats. Multiple witnesses can confirm we made no threats. We've broken no laws or regulations. This delay has gone on long enough, Blackburn declared. Both of you stand up and put your hands where I can see them. The command sent a chill through Isaiah's body. This was escalating in a terrifying direction. Officer Marcus Bailey intervened as a crew member. I can officially state that these passengers have not violated any airline policies. Removing them would be improper and potentially discriminatory. Diane stepped forward, face flushed with anger. Bailey, you're suspended effective immediately. Leave the aircraft now. You can't suspend me for telling the truth, Marcus replied. Watch me, Diane snapped. Officers, please remove these two passengers so we can depart. Officer Morris seemed hesitant, noting the increasing number of passengers recording the interaction. Ryan, maybe we should verify the boarding passes first. The decision has been made, Blackburn replied tersely. He turned to Isaiah and Zion. Stand up now and put your hands where I can see them. With grave reluctance, the brothers complied, aware that dozens of phone cameras were capturing every moment. We've done nothing wrong, Isaiah stated clearly, making sure his words were captured on the recordings. We are being removed despite being in our correct seats and having violated no regulations or laws. Keep your hands where I can see them, Blackburn ordered, reaching for his handcuffs. A collective gasp went through the cabin as the officer approached with handcuffs. Is that really necessary? Officer Morris asked her partner quietly. They're being non-compliant, Blackburn replied. Protocol is clear. In a surreal moment that would later be viewed millions of times on social media, Isaiah and Zion Washington Ivy League graduates, successful entrepreneurs, men who had done absolutely nothing wrong, were handcuffed on Delta Airlines Flight 1857 for the crime of insisting on sitting in the seats they had purchased. "This is wrong," the college student in 4C called out, still recording. "They didn't do anything." "You'll be next if you don't quiet down," Diane threatened. Marcus Bailey stood his ground. "I'm officially registering a complaint about this action. It violates company policy and federal aviation regulations." "You're fired, Bailey," Diane hissed. "Get off my aircraft." "I don't work for you, Diane. I work for Delta Airlines," Marcus replied. "And everything that's happening right now is being recorded from multiple angles." As the brothers were led toward the exit in handcuffs, Karen Blackwell settled comfortably into seat 2B with a small, satisfied smile. Several passengers looked away uncomfortable with what they were witnessing, yet unwilling to intervene. Others, however, had begun to realize the injustice unfolding before them. Murmurs of protest rose from various points in the cabin. "This isn't right. They didn't do anything wrong. It's because they're black, isn't it?" Captain Harrison's voice came over the PA system one final time. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to the extensive delay and crew duty hour limitations, this flight is now canceled. All passengers must deplane and see gate agents for rebooking options." The announcement triggered immediate chaos. Passengers who had remained silent during the twins' mistreatment now erupted in anger about their disrupted travel plans. The cabin filled with shouts and complaints. As Isaiah and Zion were led off the aircraft in handcuffs, the cruel irony wasn't lost on them. The flight was grounded anyway, rendering their humiliation and mistreatment completely pointless. Karen Blackwell wouldn't be flying to San Francisco in seat 2B after all. In the jetway, Isaiah caught his brother's eye. Despite everything, the handcuffs, the missed meeting, the public humiliation, Zion's expression conveyed a single resolute message: this isn't over. And as they were marched through Atlanta International Airport in handcuffs, smartphones capturing their procession from all angles, both brothers knew that what had begun as a simple seating dispute would become something much larger. Something that might, in the long run, force a reckoning with the everyday injustices that countless others had faced in silence. They couldn't know it then, but their humiliation was about to become a catalyst for change. The holding cell at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport was sterile and cold, with hard plastic seating and fluorescent lighting that gave everything a sickly pallor. Isaiah and Zion Washington sat side by side, no longer in handcuffs, but still in custody, their perfectly tailored suits now rumpled, their dignity wounded. 3 hours had passed since their removal from Delta Flight 1857. Their phones, wallets, and briefcases containing all their presentation materials for the Jameson Capitol meeting had been confiscated during processing. They had been permitted 1 phone call each. Both had called their mother, not wanting her to learn about their situation from viral videos that were undoubtedly already circulating online. "What are we being charged with?" Isaiah had asked repeatedly, only to receive vague references to disrupting an aircraft and failing to comply with crew instructions. Now they waited, watching the clock on the wall tick past the scheduled time of their meeting in San Francisco. The opportunity they had worked toward for 4 years, the potential investment that could have transformed their company and secured their mother's financial future, was slipping away with each passing minute. "I should have just moved to another seat," Zion said, quietly breaking the silence between them. "All of this, for what? 2 seats in first class?" Isaiah shook his head. "This was never about the seats. You know that." "They'll spin it that way," Zion replied. 2 entitled young men causing a scene over seating assignments, delaying a flight for hundreds of passengers. "The videos will show what really happened," Isaiah said, though uncertainty crept into his voice. He had seen too many clear cases of injustice, explained away, justified, or simply ignored. The door to the holding area opened. A police officer they hadn't seen before entered. "Washington and Washington, you're being released." Isaiah blinked in surprise. "What about the charges?" "No charges are being filed at this time," the officer replied, not meeting their eyes. "You're free to go. Your belongings will be returned at the processing desk." The brothers exchanged confused glances. After all the drama, after being handcuffed and paraded through a busy airport after missing their crucial meeting, they were simply being released as if nothing had happened. At the processing desk, a bored-looking clerk returned their phones, wallets, and briefcases. Isaiah immediately checked his phone, which had been powered off during confiscation. As it booted up, a flood of notifications filled the screen: missed calls, text messages, social media alerts. "What's going on?" he asked Zion, whose phone was similarly overwhelmed with activity. Before Zion could answer, Isaiah's phone rang. The caller ID displayed unknown, but he answered anyway. "Isaiah Washington, this is Amara Johnson, attorney with Civil Rights Action Now. I've been trying to reach you for hours. Do not speak to anyone from Delta Airlines, the Atlanta Police Department, or the media until you have legal representation. My firm would like to represent you and your brother pro bono in what appears to be a clear case of racial discrimination and false arrest." Isaiah put the call on speaker so Zion could hear. "How did you even know about this? We've been in custody for just a few hours. Mr. Washington, videos of your arrest have gone viral. Number Justice for Washington Twins is trending nationwide. But the narrative is being controlled by parties with interests contrary to yours. We need to move quickly to ensure your side of the story is properly represented." Outside the airport security office, Isaiah and Zion were met with a surreal scene. Several local news crews had gathered cameras and microphones at the ready. Smartphone cameras turned in their direction, as people recognized them from the viral videos. "We need to get out of here," Zion muttered. A man approached them, Marcus Bailey, the flight attendant, who had stood up for them on the plane. He was no longer in his Delta uniform, instead wearing jeans and a simple button-down shirt. "I've been waiting for you," he said. "I figured they'd release you eventually. No actual laws were broken." "Thank you for what you did on the plane," Isaiah said, genuinely moved by the man's integrity. "It couldn't have been easy." Marcus shook his head. "It was nothing compared to what you experienced. But listen, I have something that might help." He held up his personal phone. "I recorded everything on my own device, not the company phone. The whole interaction from the moment Karen took your seat until they led you away in handcuffs. It clearly shows you did nothing wrong." Zion's eyes widened. "That could be crucial evidence." "That's why I waited," Marcus said. "I've already sent copies to myself via encrypted email, but I wanted to give you the original recording directly. I've seen too many of these incidents get buried or twisted." "Have you been disciplined for speaking up?" Isaiah asked. Marcus's expression hardened slightly. "Diane put me on administrative leave pending an investigation for insubordination. But I've been with Delta for 15 years with a spotless record. They'll have a hard time making that stick, especially with all these videos circulating." As they spoke, Isaiah scrolled through some of the social media notifications on his phone. The story was indeed everywhere, but the framing varied wildly. Some headlines read, "Black entrepreneurs handcuffed on Delta flight after white passenger takes their seat," while others went with "Disruptive passengers removed from Delta flight after threatening woman." One news clip showed Karen Blackwell giving a tearful interview outside the airport. "I was just trying to get home to my family when these men became aggressive and made me fear for my safety. I'm grateful to Delta and the police for taking my concerns seriously." The clip cut to Gerald Palmer, identified as Executive VP, Westfield Financial. "I witnessed the whole thing. These young men were belligerent and refused to follow simple instructions from the flight crew. This had nothing to do with race and everything to do with behavior." Isaiah felt a surge of anger. "They're completely misrepresenting what happened." "That's why you need legal representation immediately," Marcus advised. "This is already being spun in directions that protect the airline and the police while vilifying you." Outside the airport, the brothers found another surprise waiting. A small group of protesters had gathered holding hastily made signs reading "Justice for the Washington Twins" and "Flying while black shouldn't be a crime." One young woman approached them. "You're the Washington brothers, right? From the Delta flight, I'm Jamie. I was in seat 4C. I recorded everything. She held up her phone. They're trying to make it sound like you did something wrong, but you didn't. I'm happy to be a witness. Isaiah felt a complex mix of emotions: gratitude for allies like Marcus and Jamie, rage at the injustice they'd experienced, despair over their missed opportunity with Jameson Capital, and growing resolve to ensure this incident wasn't simply forgotten or misrepresented. Back at their hotel, the brothers attempted to salvage what they could of their business opportunity. Isaiah called Jameson Capital explaining what had happened and requesting a rescheduled meeting. "I'm sorry, Mr. Washington," the executive assistant replied coolly, "but Mr. Jameson's schedule is fully booked for the next several months. Perhaps you can try again next quarter." The message was clear: their window of opportunity had closed. The investment firm had seen the news and decided the Washington brothers were too controversial, too risky to be associated with. As the day wore on, more consequences emerged. ConnectUp's user metrics showed a significant drop, potential users and businesses abandoning the platform after seeing the negative publicity. Their small but growing company was taking a serious hit based on misrepresentations and outright lies. By evening, Amara Johnson, the civil rights attorney, arrived at their hotel for an in-person consultation. She was a sharp, focused woman in her 40s with immaculate braids and a no-nonsense demeanor. "The good news," she explained after reviewing all the video evidence, "is that you have an exceptionally strong case. False arrest, racial discrimination, defamation, multiple parties bear liability here. We don't want money," Zion said firmly. "We want the truth to come out. We want accountability." Amara nodded appreciatively. "I understand. But financial consequences are often the only language that forces institutional change. And frankly, the economic damage to your business and reputation is real. It deserves compensation." Isaiah stared out the hotel window at the Atlanta skyline. "We worked so hard to get to where we are. 4 years of grinding of ramen dinners and shared studio apartments, all to build something that connects minority entrepreneurs with investors who believe in diversity." He turned back to Amara and Zion. "And in a cruel twist, we get profiled and publicly humiliated on our way to our biggest investor meeting." "There's something else you should know," Amara said, her expression grave. "My team has been researching the parties involved. Gerald Palmer, the man in seat 1A who supported Karen Blackwell's false claims, he's the executive VP at Westfield Financial." So Zion asked, "Westfield Financial is the parent company of Raleigh Ventures, which is the primary investor in Exclusive Connect." Amara let the information sink in. Exclusive Connect is. Our main competitor, Isaiah, finished the realization dawning. "They launched 6 months after us with nearly identical features, but 10 times our funding. This may not have been a random incident," Amara suggested. "Palmer may have recognized you, realized you were heading to a meeting with Jameson Capital, a potential game changer for ConnectUp, and seized an opportunity to sabotage you. The possibility hung in the air, too calculated and malicious to immediately accept, yet disturbingly plausible." "We need to dig deeper," Zion said finally. "If this was deliberate corporate sabotage using racial profiling as a weapon, that changes everything." As night fell over Atlanta, the Washington brothers found themselves in an unexpected position. What had begun as the most important day of their professional lives had transformed into something entirely different. The starting point of a fight, not just for their company, but for accountability in a system that too often protected privilege at the expense of justice. Their phones continued buzzing with notifications, the online conversation evolving by the minute. Videos were being analyzed frame by frame, witnesses were coming forward, hashtags were trending, and somewhere in San Francisco, executives at Jameson Capital were watching it all unfold, perhaps already regretting their hasty decision to cancel on what might have been their most important investment opportunity of the year. 3 months after the incident on Delta Flight 1857, Isaiah and Zion Washington sat in a sleek conference room on the 23rd floor of Atlanta's Peachtree Tower. The wall-to-wall windows offered a panoramic view of the city, but the brothers' attention was focused entirely on Amara Johnson and her team of attorneys as they prepared for the day's deposition. "Remember, this is just discovery," Amara reminded them. "They'll try to provoke emotional responses. Stay calm, stick to the facts, and let me handle objections." The past 3 months had been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media appearances, and painstaking investigation. After careful consideration, the brothers had filed a comprehensive lawsuit against Delta Airlines, the Atlanta Police Department, Karen Blackwell, and Gerald Palmer. The charges included racial discrimination, false arrest, defamation, and most surprisingly to many observers, corporate conspiracy and tortious interference with business relationships. That last charge had raised eyebrows in the business press. The Washington brothers and their legal team were alleging that Karen Blackwell and Gerald Palmer had deliberately coordinated to disrupt their travel to San Francisco, knowing they were heading to a crucial investment meeting with a competitor's potential funder. "Miss Blackwell has arrived," Amara's assistant announced. "Her attorney is with her." Isaiah took a deep breath, steeling himself for the first face-to-face encounter with Karen Blackwell since that fateful day on the aircraft. When she entered, he was struck by how ordinary she appeared in person. A middle-aged white woman in an expensive but conservative suit, her expression a careful mask of neutrality. The deposition began with standard procedures, swearing in, establishing names and roles for the record preliminary statements from attorneys. Then the questioning began in earnest. "Miss Blackwell," Amara began, "please describe your relationship with Gerald Palmer prior to May 15th of this year." Karen shifted slightly. "I don't have a relationship with Mr. Palmer. We were simply on the same flight." Amara smiled thinly. "So you're stating under oath that you had never met Gerald Palmer before that day?" "That's correct." "Interesting." Amara slid a folder across the table. "These are security camera images from the Delta Sky Club at Atlanta International Airport, taken approximately 40 minutes before boarding began for Flight 1857. They clearly show you and Mr. Palmer engaged in conversation. Would you like to revise your statement?" Karen glanced at her attorney, who looked distinctly uncomfortable. "We may have spoken briefly in the lounge. It was a casual conversation. Phone records indicate Mr. Palmer called you 3 times in the 2 days preceding the flight. How do you explain that?" "Objection," Karen's attorney interjected. "These questions assume facts, not in evidence, and are beyond the scope of this deposition. Your client just testified under oath that she had no relationship with Mr. Palmer." "I'm establishing that testimony is false," Amara replied coolly. "But let's move on. Miss Blackwell, what is your professional role?" Karen hesitated. "I'm in financial services." "More specifically, please." "I'm a consultant for various investment firms, including Raleigh Ventures." Karen's composure cracked slightly. "I've done some work for them, yes." "And were you aware on May 15th that Raleigh Ventures is the primary competitor to Connect Up, the company owned by Isaiah and Zion Washington?" "I don't recall having that information." Amara slid another document across the table. "This is an email from your account to Gerald Palmer dated May 12th, 3 days before the flight. The subject line reads, Washington Twins, Jameson Capital Meeting, and it includes their flight information and a note stating, and I quote, 'We need to ensure they miss this meeting. RV. Cannot afford competition for JC funds.' Would you like to explain this email?" The color drained from Karen's face. Her attorney leaned over, whispering urgently in her ear. "We'd like to request a brief recess," the attorney announced. "By all means," Amara agreed pleasantly. "Take your time." As Karen and her attorney left the room, Isaiah turned to Amara. "How did you get that email?" "Discovery is a powerful thing," Amara replied with a satisfied smile. "Once we established reasonable suspicion of a conspiracy, the judge granted our request for limited access to their communications. What we found exceeded our expectations." Zion shook his head in disbelief. They deliberately targeted us, used racial profiling as a weapon for corporate sabotage. It gets worse. Amara continued pulling out another document. This is Diane Foster's disciplinary record from Delta. 3 previous complaints of discriminatory treatment toward passengers of color, all quietly resolved with minimal consequences. And here she produced another file, are reports from 5 other minority business owners who experienced suspicious travel disruptions before major investor meetings over the past 2 years. All flights where Gerald Palmer was coincidentally present. The systematic nature of the operation was staggering. Palmer, as executive VP of a major financial services company, had apparently been using his frequent first-class travel to identify and sabotage minority competitors heading to important meetings. He'd enlist accomplices like Karen to create disruptions, knowing that implicit bias would often lead flight crews and security personnel to assume the minority passengers were at fault. When Karen and her attorney returned, the change in demeanor was immediately apparent. Gone was the confident, slightly condescending woman who had entered the room. In her place was someone who realized her actions had been exposed in their full, calculated malice. "My client would like to discuss settlement options," her attorney announced. Amara's expression remained unchanged. "I'm afraid that train has left the station. This case is going to trial." In the weeks that followed, more damning evidence emerged. Security footage from the aircraft, which Delta had initially claimed was unavailable, was discovered during forensic examination of the airline servers. It clearly showed the entire interaction, validating the Washington brothers' account entirely. Officer Blackburn's body cam footage, also initially reported as corrupted, was recovered and revealed disturbing comments made to his partner before boarding. "Let's get these boys off the plane quick. First class isn't for everyone." Marcus Bailey, the flight attendant who had stood up for the twins, became a key witness. Despite pressure from Delta management, he provided detailed testimony about the events on the aircraft and a documented history of discriminatory behavior from Diane Foster. The college student from Seat 4C, identified as Jamie Rodriguez, came forward with her complete recording of the incident, which contradicted Gerald Palmer's public statements point by point. Other passengers, seeing the mounting evidence, began contacting the Washington brothers' legal team with their own accounts and recordings. Most significantly, a whistleblower from Raleigh Ventures provided internal documents revealing a systematic effort to undermine ConnectUp specifically because it threatened their monopoly on matching minority businesses with investors. The documents included profiles of the Washington brothers, their travel schedules, and strategies for disrupting their business development efforts. As the case built, public opinion shifted dramatically. The initial viral videos, which had been ambiguous enough to allow misinterpretation, were now supplemented with security footage, witness statements, and documented evidence of conspiracy. Number Justice for Washington Twins evolved from a social media hashtag to a movement highlighting the intersection of racial discrimination and corporate malfeasance. Delta Airlines' initially defensive changed course as the evidence mounted. They announced an internal investigation, placed Diane Foster on administrative leave, and began discussions about a potential settlement. The Atlanta Police Department similarly distanced themselves from officers Blackburn and Morris, placing both under investigation for procedural violations. Jameson Capital, perhaps sensing which way the wind was blowing, reached out to reschedule the meeting they had canceled. Their representative was carefully apologetic. "We should have given you an opportunity to explain your side of the story. We pride ourselves on due diligence, and in this case we failed to apply that standard." 6 months after the incident, as the legal proceedings continued their methodical pace, the Washington brothers found themselves in an unexpected position. Their company, which had initially suffered from the negative publicity, was now experiencing unprecedented growth. The exposure from the case had brought ConnectUp to the attention of investors and minority business owners nationwide. "It's ironic," Zion remarked during a rare, quiet moment in their new expanded office space. "Their attempt to sabotage us ended up giving us more visibility than we could have ever afforded in marketing." Isaiah nodded thoughtfully. "But at what cost?" The humiliation, the stress, the countless hours spent in legal proceedings instead of building our platform. Worth it, Zion decided after a moment's reflection. Not just for us, but for everyone who comes after us. Every time someone like Karen or Gerald thinks about using racial bias as a weapon, they'll remember what happened when they tried it on the Washington twins. As the brothers returned to their work preparing for the trial that would begin the following month, they understood that what had started as a simple dispute over airplane seats had evolved into something much larger, a case that might help establish new legal precedents at the intersection of racial justice and corporate accountability. And somewhere in Atlanta, Karen Blackwell and Gerald Palmer were meeting with their increasingly concerned attorneys, watching as their carefully constructed defense crumbled beneath the weight of their own documented malice. 1 year after the incident on Delta Flight 1857, Isaiah and Zion Washington stepped into another first-class cabin, this time on a United flight from New York to San Francisco. As they settled into their spacious seats, the lead flight attendant approached with a warm smile. "Mr. Washington, and Mr. Washington, welcome aboard. Can I offer you anything before takeoff?" Isaiah returned her smile. "We're fine, thank you." As the attendant moved on to other passengers, Zion leaned toward his brother. Quite a different reception this time. Isaiah nodded, taking in the cabin with a reflective gaze. Amazing what a landmark legal victory and a national conversation on racial bias can do for customer service. The past year had transformed the Washington twins, from relatively unknown tech entrepreneurs to symbols of resistance against both everyday discrimination and corporate malfeasance. The conclusion of their legal battle 3 months earlier had made headlines nationwide. Washington twins prevail. Delta Airlines settles discrimination suit for $9.2 million. Corporate conspiracy exposed. Palmer and Blackwell face federal charges for business interference. Justice served. Atlanta PD officers disciplined for discriminatory arrest of black entrepreneurs. The trial had been scheduled to last 3 weeks but ended after just 5 days when Delta Airlines offered a settlement the brothers and their legal team couldn't refuse. The financial compensation was substantial, but more importantly, the settlement included binding commitments to significant policy changes. Mandatory anti-bias training for all customer-facing employees, developed in consultation with civil rights experts. Revised protocols for resolving seating disputes, requiring verification of all boarding passes before any passenger is removed. Creation of an independent review board to investigate discrimination complaints with public reporting of outcomes. Installation of clearly visible cameras in all aircraft cabins, with footage retained for a minimum of 90 days. Establishment of a $10 million scholarship fund for minority students pursuing careers in aviation and technology. Karen Blackwell and Gerald Palmer hadn't fared as well. Once the full extent of their conspiracy was exposed, including similar actions against other minority business owners, they faced not only civil penalties but criminal charges for fraud, conspiracy, and civil rights violations. Palmer had been fired from Westfield Financial, and both were now awaiting trial, their reputations and careers in tatters. Diane Foster, the lead flight attendant who had escalated the situation, was terminated from Delta after the company's internal investigation revealed a pattern of discriminatory behavior. Officers Blackburn and Morris were disciplined for procedural violations, with Blackburn subsequently resigning from the force. Marcus Bailey, who had risked his career to stand up for what was right, was promoted to a new position at Delta Director of Diversity and Customer Experience, where he now led the implementation of the very training programs required by the settlement. But the most profound transformation had been to ConnectUp itself. The publicity surrounding the case had brought their platform unprecedented attention. Minority business owners flocked to the app, seeing the Washington brothers as champions who understood firsthand the unique challenges they faced. Investors, too, recognized both the market opportunity and the positive publicity of supporting a company at the forefront of promoting diversity and entrepreneurship. 6 months after the incident, Jameson Capital had come back to the table with an offer far exceeding their original intentions. $25 million for a minority stake in ConnectUp, along with strategic partnerships that opened doors institutional investors nationwide. Connect Up had grown from a promising startup to an industry leader with over 50 employees and offices in Atlanta, New York, and San Francisco. They had facilitated more than $150 million in investments to minority-owned businesses across the country, transforming communities and creating thousands of jobs. The brothers had also established the Washington Justice Foundation, using a portion of their settlement to provide legal support to victims of discrimination in commercial settings. The foundation had already taken on 15 cases, winning or favorably settling 12 of them. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain's voice came over the PA system, interrupting Isaiah's reflections. This is Captain Rodriguez. On behalf of United Airlines, I want to welcome you aboard Flight 742 to San Francisco. Our flight time today will be approximately 5 hours and 35 minutes. We're expecting clear skies all the way to California. As the aircraft pushed back from the gate, Isaiah felt his phone buzz with a notification. It was a message from their mother. "So proud of my boys. Speaking of which, have you seen the latest?" She had attached a link to a Forbes article, Washington twins named to 30 under 30, list how two brothers turned discrimination into a movement for change. Isaiah smiled, showing the message to Zion. Their journey had been far from easy, but they had transformed what could have been merely a personal injustice into a catalyst for systemic change. Their success wasn't just measured in dollars invested or users acquired, but in policies reformed and mindsets shifted. As the plane accelerated down the runway and lifted into the clear Atlanta sky, Isaiah thought about all the people who would never know what the Washington twins had endured that day, but who would benefit from the changes their case had spurred. Every minority passenger who would be treated with greater respect because flight crews had received proper training. Every entrepreneur who would secure funding through Connect Up to build their dream. Every person who would think twice before using racial bias as a weapon. Sometimes, Isaiah said softly to his brother, as the plane leveled off, you have to stay in your seat to change the world. Zion nodded, understanding the deeper meaning behind his brother's words. It wasn't just about airplane seats, but about refusing to be displaced from first class, from boardrooms, from any space where they had every right to be. As the flight attendant approached with beverage service, both brothers settled comfortably into their seats, ready for whatever the journey ahead might bring. The Washington twins story reminds us that racial discrimination doesn't always arrive with obvious hatred or explicit slurs. Often it appears in seemingly mundane situations, like airplane seating disputes, where the burden of proof falls unfairly on people of color. Isaiah and Zion did everything right. They remained calm, presented evidence, and followed proper procedures, yet still faced humiliation and injustice. Their experience highlights how privilege operates in society. Karen and Gerald weaponized a system designed to protect all passengers, knowing implicit bias would work in their favor. They counted on flight attendants, security personnel, and police officers to make assumptions based on race rather than facts. Most importantly, the story teaches us about the power of documentation, persistence, and collective action. The videos taken by fellow passengers, Marcus's principled stand, and the brothers' refusal to accept injustice created accountability where there might have been none. Their legal victory didn't just deliver personal vindication, it forced institutional change, benefiting countless future travelers. Sometimes justice requires staying in your seat when the world tells you to move. Have you ever witnessed discrimination but stayed silent? Would you have stood your ground like the Washington twins, or given up your rightful seat to avoid confrontation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you or made you think differently about everyday racism, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of resilience and justice. Share this video with someone who needs to understand how discrimination operates in everyday situations. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the most powerful act is simply refusing to be displaced from where you rightfully belong.